Ever wonder why some muscle car engines became legends while others just became footnotes? What if I told you there was one engine that scared insurance companies more than almost any other, yet most people today don't even know half its story? We're diving deep into the Mopar 446 pack, an engine so wild that mechanics would literally step back when someone fired one up for the first time. Today we're counting down 20 shocking secrets about this street terror that even die-hard Mopar fans might not know. And trust me, by the time we get to number 1, you'll understand why this engine still makes grown men nervous 50 years later. Hit that subscribe button if you love muscle car history, and let's get into it. Number 20. The six-pack name came from its triple two-barrel Holley carburetors sitting on an aluminum Edelbrock intake manifold. Now, most people know the six-pack had 3 carbs. That's not the secret. The secret is how this setup got its nickname. See, back in 1969, Chrysler engineers were sitting around after testing this new triple-carb setup. They'd been running it all day at Chelsea Proving Grounds. Someone cracked open a cooler. Someone else made a joke about the engine having a six-pack of its own. The name stuck. But here's where it gets interesting. The marketing department hated it. They thought it sounded too casual, too unprofessional. They wanted to call it the Triple Threat or the Tri-Power Plus. But the engineers had already started using six-pack in all their documentation. By the time the suits found out, it was too late. The name had spread through the factory. Workers were already painting it on air cleaners. And honestly, it was perfect. 6 carb barrels. 6-pack. Sometimes the best names come from the shop floor, not the boardroom. Number 19. Dodge called it the 6-pack. But Plymouth badged identical setups as 446 barrel. This wasn't just badge engineering. This was corporate politics at its finest. Plymouth division executives were furious about the 6-pack name. They thought it made their cars sound like beer trucks. So they insisted on calling their version the 6-barrel. Same engine, same carbs, same everything. Just a different name on the air cleaner. But here's what nobody talks about. The Plymouth dealers actually preferred 6-barrel. They said it sounded more technical, more sophisticated. Dodge dealers thought Plymouth was being uptight. This led to some hilarious situations at drag strips. You'd have a Dodge guy and a Plymouth guy with identical engines arguing about what to call them. Meanwhile, everyone else just called them both 6-packs anyway. The Plymouth 6-barrel badges are actually rarer today. Collectors pay extra for them. It's funny how something that was basically a corporate tantrum became valuable. Even funnier? Chrysler's own internal documents couldn't keep it straight. Half the service bulletin said 6-pack. The other half said 6-barrel. Mechanics just threw their hands up and worked on the engines. Number 18. It debuted mid-1969 on the Super Bee and Roadrunner as a cheaper alternative to the 426 Hemi. Cheaper is relative here. We're talking about saving maybe $800. But in 1969, that was serious money. That was 2 months' salary for a lot of people. Chrysler knew the Hemi was too expensive for most buyers. They needed something with Hemi performance at a more reasonable price. The 6-pack was their answer. But calling it an alternative doesn't tell the whole story. This was a calculated assault on the Hemi's throne. Engineers were told to get within 10% of Hemi performance at half the cost. They got closer than anyone expected. The first Super Bees with 6-packs started showing up at dealers in March 1969. No announcement, no fanfare. Just suddenly, there they were. Salesmen didn't even know what they had at first. One dealer in Michigan sold 3 6-pack Super Bees for regular $383 prices before realizing his mistake. Those buyers got the deal of the century. The factory only built about 1,800 that first year. Today, a mid-year '69 6-pack car is incredibly rare. Most people don't even know they exist. Number 17. Officially rated at 390 horsepower, real output was closer to 420 to 430 horsepower, nearly matching the Hemi's performance, 390 horsepower. What a joke. Chrysler's dyno sheets from 1969 tell a different story. They were seeing 420, 430, sometimes more. With good tuning and premium gas, 450 wasn't unusual, but they couldn't advertise that. Insurance companies were already going crazy. NHRA was reclassifying cars left and right, so Chrysler played the game, 390 horsepower. Wink, wink. The Hemi was rated at 425, also a lie. Real Hemis made 470, 480. But here's the thing. On the street, the six-pack was often faster. It made its power lower in the RPM range. It was easier to launch. The Hemi needed perfect technique. The six-pack just needed you to floor it. Magazines at the time knew what was up. They'd test a six-pack, get 12-second quarter miles, and pretend to be surprised. Everyone knew these ratings were fiction. It was like professional wrestling. We all agreed to pretend it was real. The best part? Insurance companies eventually caught on. By 1970, a six-pack cost almost as much to insure as a Hemi. So much for the cheaper alternative. Number 16. The outboard carbs only opened under heavy throttle, giving street manners and drag strip punch. This is what made the six-pack genius. At part throttle, you're only running on the center carb. It's basically a normal 440, smooth, quiet. Your grandmother could drive it to church, but Matt, the throttle? Everything changes. Those outer carbs snap open. Suddenly you've got 850 CFM of fuel and air cramming into the engine. The sound alone was worth the price. It went from purr to scream instantly. The engineering was beautifully simple. Vacuum-operated diaphragms controlled the outer carbs. When manifold vacuum dropped under acceleration, they opened. No computers, no electronics, just physics. But timing was everything. The carbs had to open at exactly the right moment. Too early and you'd bog. Too late and you'd miss the power. Chrysler spent months getting it perfect. They tested dozens of different spring rates and vacuum settings. The final calibration was so good that most owners never touched it. Some guys would wire the outer carbs open permanently. Bad idea. It ran terribly on the street and actually made less power. The progressive opening was the whole point. It's like having two engines in one car, a grocery getter and a race car, depending on your right foot. Number 15. Vacuum-actuated outer carbs meant a single linkage mistake could cause all three to stay wide open. Terrifying for first-timers. Picture this. You're a 19-year-old kid in 1970. You just bought a used six-pack Roadrunner. You decide to adjust the carbs yourself. How hard could it be? You mess with the linkage. Maybe you think you're making it better. You fire it up. All three carbs stick wide open. Suddenly you've got a 440 trying to suck all the air in the county. The noise is indescribable. It sounds like the engine is going to come through the hood. You panic. You can't shut it off fast enough. This happened constantly. Dealers saw it every week. Some kid would limp in with a six-pack, running on all three carbs constantly. The engine would be running so rich it was washing the cylinders down. Spark plugs fouled. Oil diluted with gas. Sometimes they'd hydrolock from raw fuel. Chrysler actually sent out special bulletins about this. They warned against letting anyone but trained techs touch the linkage. Fat chance. Every kid with a wrench thought he could improve it. The smart ones learned to disconnect the outer carb linkage before starting any adjustments. The not-so-smart ones learned the hard way. Some very expensive way. Number 14. The intake manifold's design was so efficient it was later copied by aftermarket race intakes. Edelbrock made that original six-pack intake manifold. It was aluminum, which was exotic for 1969. But the real genius was the runner design. They used what's called a dual-plane configuration with perfectly sized runners. Each runner was tuned for a specific RPM range. This wasn't accident. Chrysler and Edelbrock spent hundreds of hours on the flow bench. They tested every possible runner shape and length. The final design was so good that it flowed better than many racing intakes. After the six-pack came out, every aftermarket company studied that manifold. Holley, Offenhauser, Wyand. They all borrowed design elements. Some were pretty blatant about it. You'd see intakes that were basically six-pack copies with different names. The runners had this subtle taper that nobody else had figured out. It accelerated the air-fuel mixture just right. Even today, 50 years later, that original six-pack intake is still competitive. You see them on race cars all the time. Modern technology hasn't really improved on it. Edelbrock still makes reproductions. They're expensive. But guys who know will tell you they're worth every penny. It's one of those rare cases where the factory got it perfect the first time. Number 13. The 440 block used a forged steel crank and heavy-duty internals shared with the Hemi in some high-performance models. Not all 440s were created equal. The six-pack got the good stuff. That forged crank? Same one used in some Hemis. It could handle way more power than the cast cranks in regular 440s. We're talking about a crank that could take 7,000 RPM all day long. The main bearing caps were beefier too. The six-pack blocks got extra webbing around the mains. This wasn't obvious unless you knew where to look. But it made a huge difference in strength. The pistons were different too. Forged aluminum instead of cast. Higher compression. Better ring packages. These were basically race pistons from the factory. Some six-pack blocks even got the Hemi's premium valve springs. Same part numbers and everything. The factory was basically building a budget race engine. But here's what's crazy. They didn't advertise any of this. You had to know what you were looking at. A trained eye could spot a six-pack block immediately. Today those blocks are gold. Engine builders will pay serious money for a virgin six-pack block. They know what they're getting. It's basically a Hemi bottom end without the Hemi price tag. Number 12. Factory six-pack rods were beefier and shot peened for extra strength. The connecting rods tell the real story. Regular 440 rods were good for maybe 500 horsepower. Six-pack rods? Different animal entirely. They were forged from better steel. The beam was thicker, the big end was stronger. But the real secret was the shot peening. This is a process where they blast the rods with tiny steel balls. It compresses the surface metal, makes it much stronger. Race teams had been doing this for years. But factory shot-peened rods? That was special. Chrysler even gave them different part numbers. You could order them through the parts counter if you knew what to ask for. These rods would take 700 horsepower without breaking a sweat. Some guys ran them in full race engines, making 800 plus. They held up fine. The rod bolts were upgraded too. ARP quality stuff from the factory. They had rolled threads instead of cut threads. Stronger by about 30%. Here's something wild. NASCAR teams would buy six-pack engines just for the rods. They'd throw away everything else and keep the rods. That's how good they were. Today, a set of original six-pack rods sells for more than most complete engines cost back then. Inflation's weird, but quality is quality. Number 11. Chrysler engineers tested it extensively at Chelsea Proving Grounds, outrunning many early Hemis. Chelsea Proving Grounds, 1969. This is where the six-pack legend really started. Chrysler brought out their best Hemi cars for comparison testing. They wanted to see how close the six-pack could get. What happened shocked everyone. The six-pack cars were beating Hemis. Not by much, but beating them. The engineers thought something was wrong. They checked everything, timing, fuel, tire pressure, ran them again, same result. The six-pack was consistently quicker to 60 miles per hour. In the quarter mile, it was a dead heat. Sometimes the Hemi won by a tenth, sometimes the six-pack won. This was not supposed to happen. The Hemi was the king. The six-pack was supposed to be the prince. But here's what they figured out. The six-pack's torque curve was better for street driving. It made power right where you needed it. The Hemi needed to be wound up to work. One engineer wrote in his notes that the six-pack was embarrassing the Hemi. in real-world acceleration. That note disappeared pretty quickly. Can't have that getting out. But word spread through the facility. Soon everyone wanted to drive the six-pack test cars. They had to start limiting access. Too many engineers were taking them out for evaluation. Chelsea's test drivers loved the six-pack. They said it was more fun than the Hemi, easier to drive fast, more forgiving. These were guys who drove everything Chrysler made. Their opinion mattered. Number 10. 1970. Models gained a fiberglass air grabber hood that sealed the scoop to the carb tops. The air grabber. Just the name sounds mean. But this wasn't just for show. This was functional ram air that actually worked. The hood had this huge scoop that opened into a sealed box. When you closed the hood, foam seals pressed against the air cleaner. No leaks. Direct cold air straight to the carbs. But the cool part was how it opened. You pulled a lever inside the car. The whole scoop pivoted up. It looked like the car was taking a deep breath. Kids at stoplights would lose their minds when they saw it. Chrysler claimed it was worth 15 horsepower. Real world? More like 25 or 30 on a cold night. Cold air is dense air. Dense air makes power. Simple physics. The fiberglass hood saved about 30 pounds over steel. Doesn't sound like much. But it's all at the front of the car. Weight transfer at launch was noticeably better. Some guys ordered the air grabber just for the theater of it. They'd pop it open at every stoplight. It was like having a party trick for your car. The best part? The air grabber made this whooshing sound at full throttle. Combined with the six-pack's intake roar, it was automotive symphony. People could hear you coming from a mile away. Today, an original air grabber hood sells for more than some complete cars. Reproductions exist, but they're not quite the same. The original foam seals and hardware are nearly impossible to find. Number 9. The six-pack package also added the Dana 60 rear axle, heavy-duty suspension, and larger brakes. You couldn't just order the six-pack engine. It was a complete package. And what a package it was. The Dana 60 rear end was bulletproof. This was the same axle used in trucks. It could handle twice the torque of a standard 8 3/4. The axles themselves were 31 spline instead of 30. Sounds like a small difference, but it meant the difference between holding together and grenading on a hard launch. The suspension got serious upgrades too. Stiffer springs, bigger sway bars, heavy-duty shocks. The six-pack cars sat a little higher in the rear, classic muscle car rake. But it was functional, better weight transfer. The brakes were interesting, bigger drums all around. But more importantly, they got sintered metallic linings. These were basically race brakes that happened to be street legal. They'd stop you from 120 without fading. The whole package worked together. You couldn't get one piece without the others. Chrysler knew that six-pack power needed six-pack everything else. Otherwise, you'd break stuff. Some dealers tried to create their own six-pack cars by adding the engine to standard cars. Disaster. They'd break transmissions, rear ends, everything. The factory package was engineered as a system. Today, numbers matching six-pack cars with all the original equipment bring huge money. Every piece has to be correct. Dana 60. Right date code, right gear ratio, collectors check everything. Number 8. In 1970, the A12 package included a lift-off fiberglass hood and 4.10 gears straight from the factory, the A12. If the regular six-pack was crazy, the A12 was certifiable. This was Chrysler's barely street-legal race package. The lift-off hood wasn't hinged. You had to completely remove it. 4 hood pins held it down, no assistance. 2 people needed to take it off. Why? Weight. Every ounce mattered. The hood weighed about half what a steel hood with hinges weighed. Race cars don't need convenience. 4.10 gears from the factory. Do you understand how insane that is? Most muscle cars came with 323s, maybe 355s. 410s meant you were going racing. Period. First gear was basically useless. You'd spin through it instantly. Second gear was your launch gear. Highway driving? Forget it. At 70 miles per hour, you were turning 4,000 RPM. The engine was screaming. Gas mileage was measured in gallons per mile. But acceleration? Violent. 0 to 60 in the low fives in 1970. That was supercar territory. The A12 package was only available for a few months in 1970. Chrysler built about 1,000 total, half Super Bs, half Roadrunners. Every single one was built for one purpose: dominate superstock drag racing. And they did. 12 cars were virtually unbeatable in their class. They were so good that the NHRA kept changing the rules to slow them down. Didn't matter. They kept winning. Number 7. The six-pack was so successful that the 1970 Challenger TA and Cuda AAR used small block six-pack 340s for Trans Am homologation. This is where things get really interesting. The SCCA Trans Am series had a 305 cubic inch limit. The 340 was too big, so Chrysler destroked it to 303 inches. But they kept the six-pack setup, 3 carbs on a small block. Absolute insanity. Nobody had ever done this before. The 340 six-pack was even more radical than the 440 version. It revved to 6,500 RPM. The carbs were specifically sized for the smaller engine. Different jets, different metering, everything precisely calibrated. The sound was unreal. A small block screaming through 3 carbs sounds like nothing else. It was higher pitched than the 440, more Formula One than NASCAR. But here's the crazy part. For the street versions, the TA and AAR, Chrysler had to use the full 340, so they were actually 340 cubic inches, not 305. They were illegal for Trans Am racing, but perfect for the street. These cars got special everything: offset hood scoops, side exit exhausts, different gear ratios. The whole package was aimed at road course racing, not drag strips. They handled, they stopped. They could actually turn corners, revolutionary for American muscle. Only 2,500 TAs and 2,500 AIRs were built. Today they're among the most valuable muscle cars ever made. The 346-pack engine alone sells for $30,000. Number 6. Chrysler's drag teams loved the 446-pack for its tuning simplicity and torque over the high-strung Hemi. Professional drag racers are practical people. They want to win. They don't care about mystique or legend. And many of them chose the six-pack over the Hemi. Why? Reliability. The six-pack was simply tougher. You could run it harder, longer, with less maintenance. The Hemi needed constant attention, valve adjustments, timing tweaks. The six-pack? Set it and forget it. Tuning was easier too. 3 carbs sounds complicated, but once you understood the system, it was actually simpler than a Hemi. The progressive linkage meant you really only tuned the center carb for most conditions. The torque difference was huge. The six-pack made massive torque from 2,500 RPM. The Hemi needed 4,000 to wake up. In bracket racing, consistency matters more than peak power. The six-pack was Mr. Consistent. Sox and Martin, the legendary Chrysler race team, kept several six-pack cars as backups. When the Hemis broke, out came the six-packs. They won plenty of races with them. Don Garlits, the drag racing legend, once said the six-pack was the best all-around Chrysler engine. Not the fastest, but the best combination of power, reliability, and ease of use. That's high praise from a guy who could drive anything he wanted. Number 5. Insurance companies treated the Hemi as high risk, making the 446-pack the better street buy. By 1970, insurance had become the real enemy of muscle cars, not the competition, not the cops, insurance companies. The Hemi was basically uninsurable for anyone under 25. We're talking premiums that cost more than the car payment, literally. Some companies wouldn't insure them at all. But the six-pack? For about 6 months, it flew under the radar. Insurance companies hadn't figured out what it was yet. They saw 440 and charged regular 440 rates. Smart buyers jumped on this loophole. Then the quarter-mile times started showing up in magazines, 12-second six-packs everywhere. Insurance companies freaked out. By late 1970, six-pack rates were almost as bad as Hemi rates. Almost. Still a few $100s cheaper per year. For young guys, that difference meant everything. It was the difference between affording the car and not. This insurance situation killed muscle car sales. By 1971, dealers couldn't move six-pack cars. They sat on lots for months. Some dealers actually removed six-pack engines and installed regular 440s just to make cars sellable. Those takeout six-pack engines became gold for racers. Cheap, brand-new race engines. The insurance companies won. They killed the muscle car era. But for a brief moment, the six-pack was the perfect loophole. Hemi performance, lower insurance, the sweet spot that couldn't last. Number 4. Due to the triple carbs, fuel economy could dip below 6 miles per gallon when driven hard. 6 miles per gallon, not 16. 6. And that's if you were gentle. Get on it hard? You could see 4, maybe 3, in city driving with a heavy foot. One owner claimed he could watch the gas gauge drop in real time during acceleration. He wasn't joking. The gauge would visibly move during a full throttle run. Gas was 35 cents a gallon in 1970. Nobody cared about mileage. But even then, six-pack owners became friends with gas station attendants. They were there every other day. The 3 carbs weren't really the problem during cruise. The center carb alone was reasonably efficient. But nobody bought a six-pack to cruise. You bought it to go fast. And going fast meant all 3 carbs open, 850 CFM of fuel disappearing into the engine. Long road trips required planning. Gas stations weren't on every corner back then. You could run out of gas between towns if you weren't careful. One guy drove from Detroit to Chicago, used 3 full tanks. That's about 30 gallons for 280 miles. 9 miles per gallon on the highway. Some owners installed larger fuel tanks from station wagons, 26 gallons instead of 19. Helped a little, not much. The funny thing? Nobody who owned one cared. If you wanted economy, you bought a Valiant. The six-pack was about going fast. Fuel was just the price of admission. Number 3. The 1971 six-pack lost compression and cam timing due to emissions, ending the muscle era dominance. 1971, the beginning of the end. New emissions regulations kicked in. Compression ratios dropped from 10.5 to 1 down to 9.5. Doesn't sound like much. But it killed probably 50 horsepower. The cam timing got neutered too, less overlap, milder ramps. The engine couldn't breathe anymore. It was like trying to run a marathon with a pillow over your face. The carbs got leaned out for emissions. The outer carbs barely opened even at full throttle. What was the point of having 3 carbs if they didn't work? Power dropped to 330 horsepower. On paper. Real world? Maybe 280. A shadow of its former self. The sound changed too. That angry, ripping exhaust note became a wheeze. It was depressing. Magazine test times tell the story. 1976 packs ran mid-12s. 1971, mid-14s, 2 full seconds slower. That's an eternity in drag racing. Chrysler knew it was over. They discontinued the six-pack after 71. Actually, they discontinued everything performance-related. The party was over. Emissions and insurance had won. Today, almost nobody keeps a 71 six-pack stock. They immediately rebuild them to 70 specs. Higher compression pistons, bigger cam, proper carb jetting, bring them back to life. It's sad that the six-pack's last year was its worst. It deserved a better send-off. But regulations don't care about legacy. Number 2, six-pack engines carried a unique lift-off air cleaner lid painted 440+6 in bright orange. That orange air cleaner lid. If you know, you know. It wasn't just painted orange. It was a specific shade. Chrysler called it Hemi orange. Even though it wasn't exclusive to Hemis, the font was special too. Bold, aggressive numbers and letters. 440+6. Not 446 pack, not 446 barrel, just the mathematical expression. Genius marketing. The lid was held down by a single wing nut. You could pop it off in seconds to show off those 3 carbs, and people did, constantly. Every car show, every gas station, someone would want to see under the lid. The orange paint would chip and fade over time. Most original lids look terrible today. But that patina is worth money. Collectors want that weathered look. It proves authenticity. Reproduction lids exist. The paint's too perfect. The orange is slightly off. Real six-pack guys can spot a fake from across a parking lot. It's like a secret handshake for the Mopar crowd. Here's something most people don't know. There were actually 2 different lid designs. Early ones had 440 plus 6 in a straight line. Later ones stacked the numbers. Both are correct. But collectors argue endlessly about which is better. Some guys would order extra lids from the parts department. Keep spares for when the original got too beaten up. Smart move. Those spare lids are worth thousands today. The air cleaner assembly itself was huge. It had to be to cover 3 carbs. It dominated the engine bay. You couldn't miss it. That was the point. Number 1, surviving true 6-pack cars are rare and valuable today, especially original A12 Super Bs and Roadrunners with numbers matching engines. Here's the reality. Most 6-pack cars are dead. They were raced, crashed, or parted out decades ago. These weren't collector cars in 1970. They were cheap used cars by 1975. Kids bought them for $1,000 and destroyed them. Finding a real, numbers-matching 6-pack car today is like finding buried treasure. We're talking about maybe 5% survival rate for true 6-pack cars. Even less for A12 models. The engines were worth more than the cars for many years. People would pull the engine and junk the body. Those engines went into race cars, street rods, everything. Nobody thought to preserve the complete package. Today, different story. A numbers-matching 1976 pack Roadrunner can bring $100,000. An A12? Double that. Maybe more if it's perfect. But here's the thing about numbers matching. Everything has to be right. Engine, transmission, rear axle. Even the carburetors have date codes. One wrong number, and the value drops by half. The fakes are everywhere. People clone 6-pack cars constantly. Take a regular 440 car, add the 6-pack engine, paint the air cleaner orange, instant 6-pack. Except it's not. Real 6-pack cars had different VIN codes, different fender tags, different broadcast sheets. The documentation tells the truth. You can't fake the paperwork. Well, you can, but experts will catch you. Authentication is everything in this market. There are guys who do nothing but verify 6-pack cars. They know every casting number, every date code, every assembly line quirk. They can spot a fake part from across a room. The real survivors, the documented cars with known history, those are museum pieces now. They represent the absolute peak of American muscle. The last moment before everything changed. When you could buy a barely street-legal race car from your local dealer. When insurance was affordable and gas was cheap. When the only limitation was your courage. That's what makes them valuable. Not just the hardware, the history, the moment they represent, a time that will never come again. And there you have it. That's 20 secrets about this legendary Mopar 446-pack that most people never knew. From corporate naming battles to insurance nightmares, from Chelsea proving ground surprises to those famous orange air cleaner lids. Which of these revelations surprised you the most? And if you've ever had a close encounter with a real 6-pack car, drop your story in the comments below. We love hearing about these legendary engines still out there terrorizing the streets. Since you made it this far, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got more muscle car deep dives coming your way. Until next time, keep those carbs clean and those tires smoking. We'll see you on the next one.